I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 7 plant protein bars, 4 hydration mixes, and 4 enhanced coffee sticks. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20 to get 20% off all IQ Bar products plus free shipping. Again, go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20.
You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
I am a scientist. I am a scientist. I am a scientist. We gotta live on science alone.
Welcome to Unbiased Science, where we bring scientific method to the madness. We're your hosts, Dr. Jessica Steyer
and Dr. Andrea Love.
And today we are coming to you with a hygiene roundup. So we get so many questions asking about just day-to-day hygiene issues, what we should and shouldn't be doing. So we are going to dig into the science, or lack thereof, into a bunch of hygiene-related topics. So just really briefly, and Andrea, I am quite sure you have a lot to say about this, from an infectious disease perspective, but just thinking back to the different eras of epidemiology and how our understanding of germ theory and how we get sick and what makes us sick, and how the implementation of certain public health laws and policies like sanitation and things like that, how we saw a marked improvement in public health. We know, obviously, that hygiene is super important. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we know that there are, as our understanding of the biological world has evolved, the theories or the beliefs that kind of underpin certain hygiene practices or certain practices that people thought were related to hygiene and in reality were not, that has certainly evolved over several centuries.
Well, and also, and I know we're going to get into this, I think there are a lot of holdovers, right? So like the way that things were done, and they were done a certain way for a particular reason, we're still doing certain things, and I know I'm speaking vaguely right now, but we'll get into it, that maybe aren't necessary anymore based on improvements and regulation and stuff like that.
And it's funny because, even if you look at certain like religious traditions or cultural traditions, a lot of those were based on real issues related to hygiene or lack of hygiene practices, like cross-contamination of food products and why we bury our dishes and things like that, which, thankfully most people aren't doing anymore, but why meat products and dairy products were supposed to be separated and all of that. And that really was because of hygiene issues, or why many cultures don't eat pork, because there's a parasite that could be found in pig meat. And, again, a lot of those issues don't exist anymore, but a lot of those cultural things still persist.
All right. So I know we have a long list of things we want to get through. Do you want to kick things off with bed sheets?
Sure, why not?
So how often do you clean your bed sheets?
I mean, not as often as I should, but I fully acknowledge that. And I have a very busy schedule, but I do share the bed with 7 cats and another human. So there are a lot of factors in play there.
Same, much to my husband's chagrin. I have all 4 dogs in bed and usually the 2 kids, and throw the cats in there too.
Practically, the recommendation is you should be changing your sheets every 2 weeks. Some people, particularly dermatologists or microbiologists, say that you might even want to do it more frequently as 1 week. And there's a few reasons for that, right? So the first is you are shedding your skin cells all the time. And it's really interesting because if you actually try to look up literature on like how many skin cells you shed a day, so you have multiple layers of your skin, right? You have on the very top, you have these cells called keratinocytes, and they essentially turn over very quickly, which is why if you get like a paper cut, it actually heals pretty fast. And it's because you have this very rapid turnover of these keratinocytes. And so your skin cells are kind of always cycling. And as a result, they're always dying and falling off your body. And so you shed on average somewhere between 1 million to 5 billion skin cells a day. And probably the real estimate is about 500 million skin cells a day. That's a lot. And most of those are going to end up in the places you spend the most time. So if you think that you sleep, I don't know, 8 hours a night in a good world, that's a third of your day. So at least a third of your skin cells are going to end up in your bed. A lot of them are going to end up in your clothing because you're wearing clothing, and things that rub on your skin are going to increase the frequency with which you shed those skin cells. And so, you're shedding those in your bed. That's fine, right? They're dead. They're just, skin flakes, but those are very delicious for dust mites. And dust mites are harmless to kind of humans broadly. They don't bite you or feed on you. They're not like bed bugs or things like that, but they eat the skin cells that are left in your environment. It could be anywhere. They're found all over the world. And so dust mites eat those. So the more skin cells, the more food the dust mites have, the more the dust mites reproduce, the more dust mites you have. And dust mites are the biggest cause for asthma in humans. So it's estimated that dust mites exacerbate or lead to the development of asthma in about 60 to 90% of asthmatics. And so certainly we want to do our best to reduce the population of dust mites. So if you clean your sheets more often, you can reduce how much skin cells there are, how much dust mites there are.
And there are also other factors, right? So you're talking about dust mites and skin cells and that stuff, but our own personal hygiene is also at play. So if we're not showering so much, we know that we're bringing in bacteria. So I know, like, if I'm exhausted after a day of work, like at the very least, if I've been outside, especially like in flip-flops or something, I'm going to wash my feet. I'm not going to take my dirty feet into my bed. That's something that I'm going to do. The other thing is some people sleep in the buff, right? They sleep nude. And so you have to think about, your other bits that your sheets are getting exposed to fecal matter. Okay,
I was going to say, you didn't want to say. Yeah, no, I mean, little microscopic bits of feces can get in your sheets, and those feces have bacteria in them. And, generally they live in your gut, which is where they're supposed to be. But, if you're laying around naked and you're on your sheets and things are moving, it's very rare, but you could get those bacteria in places you don't want them on your body. You have other things, right? Do you sweat, overnight because of whatever, because it's hot out, because you're going through menopause, because you're taking medication that make you sweat. Some people drool when they're sleeping more than others. You've got oil from your skin, and you have, of course, bacteria that live on your skin, and those are all accumulating on your sheets as well.
By the way, I'm just chuckling, and I'm sorry, I think we're moving probably to the next topic because we have so much to cover, but for sure that there are people listening to this who are like, you have one camp where people are like, oh my goodness, like I wash at least once a week. Sheets are filthy. And then you have like, I have not washed my sheets in 6 months.
In decades, yeah.
Those people who are like, I'd sooner throw out my sheets and buy new ones than wash them.
Right, exactly. So, the range is going to vary person to person, right? Some people maybe have oilier skin than others. Maybe you work from home, so you're not going outside and being exposed to, dirt and particulate matter and bacteria in the environment. And so like, again, it's not a set rule. And it's not saying that like if you don't change your sheets every 2 weeks that you're going to get sick. It's just these things are things to consider for hygiene. So like a lot of things you can ask yourself, are you wearing pajamas or are you going naked? If you wear pajamas, that can trap some skin cells. So maybe you don't have to wash your sheets as often. Do you shower before bed? Or at the very least, do you wash your feet and your hands and your face before bed? That of course can remove some skin cells and limit the food for those dust mites. Do you have other things sleeping with you? Animals, other humans, things like that. If you have pets sleeping in your bed, they're bringing all their stuff with them, all their bacteria, all their dander, all their little clods of litter stuck between their paw pads. So again, those are other considerations. You might want to change them more often. The other thing that's interesting is if you move around, like if you're a rough sleeper, you're going to shed more skin cells than someone who sleeps very soundly. Now, of course, if you have skin issues, so if you have things like eczema or psoriasis or acne, you may want to change things more often as well. And then the other thing I will say before we move on is if you recently were sick from an infectious disease, you should change your bedding as soon as you're recovered, because it's unlikely that you can reinfect yourself, but it's just not worth the risk.
No. And usually when I'm sick and I'm like snotty and coughing, I don't. But also just pillowcases in particular, I just want to call those out. So like that's something that I do wash more frequently, especially because I sweat. I'm a head sweater. Just fun fact about me. So that's something that I wash. But in terms of the pillows themselves, didn't we pull the actual recommendation?
I think they say like every 6 months for like thick blankets, like throw blankets or pillows. I'll be honest, when I do strip the bed and change the sheets, I just do I don't always wash the pillows, but I wash the comforters, the blankets, the sheets, because again, I'm very lazy. So if I'm taking it all off the bed, it's all going in the washing machine and then it's all going back on the bed. And I do have several sets. And so, if you don't want to have to wash as often, you can have a couple of sets and you can just kind of rotate.
All right. Now we have to talk about towels, because that if you don't wash your towels after a while and if they remain wet and they're not drying fully in between uses, or if you're not cleaning them, and obviously we're going to talk about that, they get that musky mildewy smell that I hate so much. And what I end up doing, because my kids, they'll shower and they'll crumple up their towels and just like shove them underneath the bed when I'm like, clean up your room. And then I'll find them and I'll usually have to do a wash with like vinegar just to get the smell out, that mildewy smell.
And the mildew is fungus, essentially. So it's mold, right? So mold is just a catch-all for hundreds of different species of fungi, and mold are the visible spores that form, and that can be anywhere, right? It's typically places that are humid, so it could be clothing, it could be a garment, it could be like a towel. Sometimes in certain buildings, you can find mold growing in moist places, like in the corner of your garage, perhaps, or things like that, and you might see these black patches. So basically, these are just fungal spores that start to grow to the number that they're now visible. Now, again, most molds, whether they're on a towel or in your house or on a cheese or whatever, are harmless, but they can smell not great. You don't necessarily want to be wiping your clean body with mold spores. And for some people, those spores, when they get in the air, they can irritate your respiratory tract and exacerbate some respiratory conditions. So that's kind of the mildew portion. And again, these mold spores are microscopic. They're always around everywhere in every environment. But if they find this nice, cozy, moist place, they're going to start to grow.
So the recommendation, and I know we'll pull the link in our show notes, is that for towels in your home, you should wash them once a week, right? And you, as you said now multiple times, you need to make sure that they're dried thoroughly. Otherwise, you're going to have all these issues. But if you're going to some place, like a public place, like the gym or something, or if you're throwing it in a gym bag with like gym shoes or something like that, that's a different story. And I don't know anything about that, Andrew. You'll have to talk about what it's like to go to the gym and actually work out. But that's a different story. And that requires daily washing.
Yeah. So like if you're talking about your shower towels, like your body towels, if you have those on a rack afterwards, you're using them to towel off after your shower, they're fully dry by the time you use them again. Those can go less frequently because again, you should be using them when you're fully clean. As far as like hand towels go in the house or like kitchen towels, I would probably say, those could be more frequently, maybe a hand towel in the bathroom after you wash your hands weekly. I think a kitchen towel where you may be handling other things, you might want to do that more frequently. But again, things that you're using after you're sweaty and or dirty, those should be washed every time you use them, essentially. So like I have a bag that I throw in my car. It's got my running shoes. It's got my socks, my sports bras, all my stuff. And I always have a towel in there. And that towel gets used, after I get out for my run and I'm trying to dry off and change into like non-drenched clothes before I drive home. That doesn't smell great after. Like I am a very sweaty person when I run and and it smells. And so, yeah, that gets washed every time I get home after I've used it.
Right. That's a different story. And again, I have absolutely nothing to add to that conversation.
But again, and I think a lot of people don't think about, some of these molds, fungus includes other things that can cause human skin issues, like athlete's foot is caused by a fungus, jock itch is caused by a fungus, ringworm is also caused by a fungus. And, as someone who did judo and worked out on wrestling mats, like these things are not unfamiliar. So you want to reduce the likelihood of spreading those sorts of things around because yes, they're treatable, but they're not the most pleasant. And of course, same thing holds true if you have skin issues, just like with the sheets, you might need to be taking extra care with your towels.
Right. For all the things that we talk about, there can always be exceptions. And if you're particularly sensitive to things or anything like that, then, you might need to wash more frequently. So toothbrushes. I am so curious to hear, Andrea, how often you actually change yours out, because I will use mine until they're like, I don't know, like down to the bristles, like they're all bent out of shape. And I don't really change them so frequently.
Gosh.
What, do you change them so frequently?
I try to adhere to the American Dental Association recommendations, which is every 3 to 4 months. Now, the reason I'm gonna tell you why.
Tell us.
The reason we brush our teeth is to get plaque off our teeth, right? So plaque is formed when we eat food and we digest or the food bits mix with the saliva in our mouth. And there are enzymes in our saliva that help start the digestion process of all these macromolecules. And then the saliva and the food bits mix with the bacteria that live in our mouths because we have a microbiome in our mouth. It's called the oral microbiome. And there's 300 million different species of bacteria in your mouth. And they're, generally supposed to be there. But what happens when you eat food is that now that saliva food kind of paste mixes with the bacteria, and the bacteria are like, hey, it's snack time for us. And they start to eat the residual food particles that you can't maybe see or haven't, that hasn't gotten into your stomach. And as they metabolize those food particles, they produce byproducts, which include acids, and they start to grow too. So now you have these bacteria growing on your teeth with the food bits, and you're making this plaque. And the plaque sometimes makes your teeth feel like fuzzy, I think is the word that we use. Furry, fuzzy, right? Something like that. So plaque is like sticky and it's kind of whitish and it's got bacteria and it's got some leftover food particles and it's got saliva. And so you want to brush your teeth so that you remove this plaque because you're removing the excess food particles and you're removing, some of these excess bacteria because these bacteria are reproducing as they're eating those little food bits in your saliva. And you're also removing the acids that they form as a byproduct. So if you're not brushing your teeth regularly enough, those acids can actually start to deteriorate the outer layer of your teeth, and that can lead to tooth decay and wearing down of your tooth enamel. That's another reason why you should be using fluoridated toothpaste, because that actually helps because you're never going to get rid of the bacteria in your mouth. They live there. That's their home, but we want to reduce how much they're reproducing. So if you don't wash or don't brush your teeth and you don't brush the plaque off, it will harden and it will become tartar. And tartar is that like hard, visible, like sometimes it's yellowish, sometimes it's whitish, but you can't brush that off with a toothbrush. You have to go to a dentist and get it scaled with that metal picky thing, right? And so brushing your teeth removes the plaque before it becomes tartar. Now, if you don't do that, it can lead to gingivitis, which is gum inflammation, but then that can progress to periodontitis or periodontal disease, which is gum disease, which actually can lead to erosion of your bone in your jaw. And it can lead to, major tooth issues, tooth loss, all sorts of stuff. And there's this one species of bacteria called Porphyromonas gingivalis, and it is the biggest culprit for periodontal disease. And so that's why we want to brush. Now, if you're using a toothbrush that is beat up and broken down and the bristles aren't sharp anymore and it's all bent out of shape, it's not going to be as efficient at getting rid of that plaque and those bacteria. So that's the first reason why we want to replace it pretty often.
Well, damn, Andrea. No, I don't replace mine every 3 to 4 months. It's more like 6 to 8.
I think that used to be the old recommendation because, you go to the dentist twice a year and they gave you a toothbrush each time. But yeah, I mean, if you brush very vigorously, some people do brush harder than others, and you're noticing that it's wearing, replace it when the bristles start to wear. The other thing that you want to think about is that aside from being less effective, it can also like cut into your gum, and that can introduce bacteria into a wound that you don't want either.
Mm-hmm. And can we just make a little side note? This is not, there's a lot we want to say about oral health and oral hygiene. We're just trying
that
to
is a future episode.
It's a future episode. And the implications of having chronic dental infections and, what that means for the body and this and that. We're just talking specifically about how frequently you should change your toothbrush, just to make that crystal clear. So it should be 3 to 4 months.
You want to obviously not share your toothbrush because, even if you share a household with people, you still will have slightly different microbiomes. You don't necessarily need to or want to be sharing that. You also want to rinse it every single time so there's no visible toothpaste or things on it. And you want to make sure that you store it in a way that it's going to dry. So I kind of hate those travel caps because it traps the water in and it's just it's moist the whole time. It's a breeding ground. It's a breeding ground.
The other thing, and you could tell me if maybe this is overkill, but I never store my toothbrushes anywhere near my toilet. I keep them as far away. I'm thinking if I'm flushing a toilet, I'm just picturing things aerosolized.
Yeah, great point. So when you flush the toilet, you can fling other non-mouth bacteria like fecal coliform bacteria up in the air, and that could get on your toothbrush. There's not a ton of evidence that that's going to make you sick, but certainly the thought can be a little off-putting. So you can put it in a container, or if you have a little cabinet, you can tuck it in the cabinet. But the goal is you want it to be upright. You want it to dry. You don't need to sanitize your toothbrush, but if you feel the need to, use either 3% hydrogen peroxide or Listerine mouthwash. Soak the brush in it. You don't want to heat it in any way because that can damage the bristles and again defeat the purpose of having a toothbrush. You can use either a handheld, a mechanical, or you can use a motorized toothbrush. Both of those are perfectly effective.
Andrea, I knew someone in college, and I'll share who after we are not recording. Sorry, who would store her toothbrush in water. And that's just, oh my gosh, do not do this. Please do not do this.
I can't wait to hear who it is.
Yes. Oh gosh, I'm totally, oh goodness, putting this person on blast, but I won't say it publicly. But anyway, I'm sure she doesn't do it anymore. But that's not a good idea. Okay. Yeah. All right. Next, Andrea, I know you have a lot to say about this.
I do.
The kitchen sponge. And oh man, can everyone just smell right now? Do we all know that smell of a crusty old sponge?
Yeah.
All right, talk to us. Let's get into it.
I feel like kitchen sponges should be eliminated from the planet. They are a microbiological nightmare. We'll just say that. I have a couple sponges in the kitchen. I don't use them unless it is to get some food bits off before they then go into the dishwasher for a hot cycle. I do not use them for cleaning surfaces. I do not use them for cleaning things that are then going to immediately be used for food. And I will tell you why. Because they are the perfect habitat for bacteria. They are porous. They are moist. They have all these different layers in them. So all these different scaffolds. Think of an apartment building for bacteria.
Nooks and crannies.
They hold food scraps because what are you using with your sponge? You're cleaning off your plates, right? So there's food for the bacteria. It's an apartment building for the bacteria. It's got the climate for the bacteria. A kitchen sponge can house 54 billion bacteria per cubic centimeter. So that's a centimeter by a centimeter by a centimeter. 54 billion with a B. Kitchen environments have more bacteria than bathrooms, and the majority of those bacteria are on the sponge. So yeah, I don't use sponges.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
So, well, first, let me just say, I also don't like sponges. I do have a sponge, but I don't use it frequently. Instead, I use I think they're called Swedish towels. They're
Yes.
very absorbent, or like the microfiber ones. And then I'll very, very frequently just throw them in the wash and, so that they're
Yes.
clean. But I know a lot of people will microwave their
Yes.
sponge.
So you can microwave them or boil them or
Okay.
bleach them, but it's not consistent sponge to sponge because every sponge is made slightly different, and it doesn't eliminate all the bacteria. So it's really variable. It's going to be better than a not sanitized sponge, but it's not better than not using a sponge, basically.
Got it.
So, just kind of some of the data. If you look at, there have actually been a decent number of studies looking at sponges, and they actually assess the bacteria levels in sponges before use and then throughout use. And they weren't able to really detect any measurable levels of bacteria on new kitchen sponges, even though they're technically not sanitized when you buy them, but they're very dry and they're not hospitable. There's not food on them for bacteria. So just not a great environment until they get wet and there's food there. So, several studies have investigated this. There's hundreds of different species on sponges. Most are harmless, like the vast majority of the world's bacteria. But, anything that you pick up in the kitchen that can be pathogenic, including things in raw food products or, that are sitting in the sink and kind of fermenting. So, species that can cause illness to humans, like E. coli species and Enterococcus and Enterobacteria and Campylobacteria and Salmonella and Pseudomonas. So, generally, yes, the vast majority of these 300 plus species that are found in kitchen sponges aren't going to be harmful, but it's, not worth the risk.
Right.
And you're not getting anything clean because you're just rubbing bacteria on things.
Exactly. So really the recommendation would be to either replace your sponges if that's an option for you, pretty frequently, to use like washcloths or something like that. I had something, they're basically just rags, but you can wrap them on what looks like a regular paper towel holder. I think they're called like Forever paper towels. No, this is not sponsored. That's a great way. You could just throw them in the wash. And also brushes are, because they have fewer nooks and crannies, they're less absorbent, they harbor fewer pathogens than sponges.
Much fewer, yeah. So if we're talking about like cleaning dishes or pots and pans, go with a brush over a sponge because there's much lower bacteria levels in these brushes. The brushes are really not as hospitable. They don't trap moisture. They dry out fully. And as a result, the bacteria die more quickly if they get trapped on a brush. And if you're talking about surface cleaning, use rags and cleaners that will sanitize surfaces and wash those rags very frequently. Yes, you can also use paper towels. I will say we do use paper towels for certain surfaces, particularly because we have 7 cats and things are not the cleanest. And yes, they're not as environmentally friendly, but of course, you're trying to balance safety and all of the other factors.
Exactly.
But yeah, we could just extinct sponges. That would not the ones that live in the ocean. I love those sponges, just the ones in the kitchen. We'll get rid of those.
Now we're the anti-sponge scientists. All right, this next topic really grosses me out, and it's something that I will say I do kind of obsess over. Water bottles, and specifically, there's a mosquito, reusable water bottles. And I get grossed out in between uses. It's like sometimes there's a film that develops. Do you see this mosquito? That film really grosses me out. And I feel like people assume that, you could use the water bottle. It's just water. Just empty it out and then refill it. This is not good.
Yeah. So just like with your toothbrushes, whatever you put your mouth on, I don't care if you're just drinking water out of it, you're putting your mouth on your water bottle that's got your saliva, that's got your skin, your lip bacteria, your oral bacteria.
Backwash.
Yeah, even if you don't think you're backwashing, you're still backwashing. So,
and oh my God, kids, my children's water bottles, just watching them gulp and then it and leaving like the little particles just like swooshing back into the bottle. I'm just like fantasizing about disinfecting it. I'm sorry, go on, Andrea.
No, it's a great point. And you know what? I'm honestly, I'm very bad about this. I have a double-walled insulated and I carry it around with me all the time. And I I will dump the water and I will refill it if I don't finish it. And I do wash it every now and then. But yes, you should be washing it much more frequently than you are. I can guarantee everyone listening is not washing it frequently enough, because even though it's just water in there, you get your saliva, and your saliva has some plaque in it, and your plaque has some bacteria, and there's some microscopic food particles. So, maybe what you put in there is water, but there's other things that get in there too.
Well, and the other thing, I feel like people often focus on the bottle itself, but then neglect the lip of the bottle. Or
that's exactly my point. Yes.
And that's often, that's where
you're putting your face on. Yeah.
Right,
and it's not just I didn't say mouth.
Well,
it's not just bacteria too, with mildew and things like that. And that's like something I noticed. So I, when I run, when I do my long runs, I wear a running vest, and that has a bladder, a camelback bladder or whatever, Nathan bladder. And that has your little tubing, right? And the tubing is like the bane of my existence, because it's impossible to clean out thoroughly. And like the little mouth bit, like, you're always like paranoid it's going to get mold and mildew. And then once it gets in there, you can't clean it out. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not just, and that only ever has water in it too. So again, it's bacteria from your mouth, but it's also mildew that's growing as a result of trapped moisture in some of the little cracks and crannies of the water bottle, like the crease around, the top of the bottle and so on. So
there was a small study, and I couldn't track down, honestly, who actually authored it. I'm pretty sure it was sponsored by a water filtration company. I'm not entirely sure. So I would take it with a grain of salt, but I know that the findings from that study were picked up by the media, and the headline that said water bottles are revealed to be dirtier than a toilet seat went viral. That feels a little bit of an exaggeration. I did track down a few other studies, small studies that from independent labs, where they tested like 12 water bottles, and they did find an alarming number of viable bacteria cells, more than 300,000 colony forming units per square centimeters.
Yeah, I mean, so yes, there's a lot of bacteria in your mouth, right? What did I say? 300 different species, and you're spewing them out all over the place. But I think, again, in addition to the number of bacteria, you also want to talk about the species of bacteria, right? So like the vast majority of bacteria are not harmful to people. So, you want to look at the numbers and the types, right? So maybe there's a total number that's more than what's on a toilet seat, because people are pretty good about cleaning their toilet seat because they think of it as a dirty place, but people don't think about their water bottle being a dirty place. Just like most people are not sanitizing their phone as often as they should, and that's probably even dirtier than your water bottle and maybe not your sponge, but it's pretty dirty. But again, like certain bacteria live in certain environments. So the bacteria you're going to find in a toilet seat are going to be fecal bacteria, like fecal coliform, whereas the bacteria that you're going to find in your water bottle are going to be oral bacteria, like Pseudomonas and things like that.
So practical guidance. I try to buy water bottles that have a simple lip, like one that doesn't have a lot of ridges.
And the wide mouth is really good to wash. Yeah.
Right. Definitely wash with soap and water in between uses, even if it's just water that's in the bottle, as we've discussed. And I have seen, I don't know how you feel about this. I know some people will do a very diluted bleach solution, like once a week or once a month. And I'm trying to look up I think it's 1 tablespoon of bleach per quart of water. And of course, please make sure that if you do that, to really thoroughly make sure it's rinsed.
Sure it's thoroughly rinsed. You can also use like cleaning vinegar too, if you wanted to. And bleach and the vinegar can be really useful if you are seeing like visible mildew growing in certain places, and that will kind of help reduce that. And sometimes, again, there's like a little musty smell if mildew gets in some of those bottles, so that can help with the smell as well.
Andrea, this next topic, we are divided.
The question is, how often should we be washing our faces, and do we really need to be washing our faces every day? So there's a lot of misconceptions. There are some people that have been led to believe that you have to wash your face 2 times a day, that you can't wash your face in the shower, and so on and so forth. So like general rule of thumb, dermatologists in particularly recommend that you wash your face at least once a day. If you have certain conditions, like maybe you wear makeup or you have oily skin or you work outdoors or in areas where there might be pollution, you might want to wash in the morning and in the evening. You can wash your face in the shower as long as the water's not too hot. The concern is that because the hot water can open the pores up, you don't want to be causing excess irritation. But as long as the water in the shower is not too hot, you can definitely do double duty and wash your body and your hair and your face in the shower. You ideally don't want to use like bar soap, though. You want to use something that's designed for your face because the facial skin is a little bit different than like the skin on your hands, which is a little bit tougher. I will say that I don't ever wash my face.
my God.
I let the shampoo filled water from washing my hair run down my face when I shower, and that's what I call washing my face.
Well, Andrea, if we all looked like you, we would we would all do that. But no, so I do. Sorry, were you going to finish?
I was gonna say it underscores like there's a lot of diversity, right? Like genetics can play a big role in like your skin quality. Like I am very lucky and fortunate that I don't have oily skin and I don't have skin issues and I don't have acne, and that allows me to be very negligent about my facial hygiene.
Hashtag blessed. But no, so I do wear makeup. I sweat a lot. There are certain reasons. I also just like washing my face. I like the feeling of a clean face. And
I don't. It makes me feel dry, like a snail left out in the sun.
Well, funny you say snail, because after I really do a thorough scrub of my face, I put on my snail mucin. Okay, I promise you hear it here. I will do it. We have to do an episode on snail mucin. I'm convinced that the snails hold the secret to good skin.
They got a lot of
mucus.
They got a lot of mucus.
But anyway, so I am someone, I don't disagree with you. I don't think that what I'm doing is necessary, but because, I do have a lot of, I have stuff on my face. I need to wash it. And I am a fan of the double cleanse. I usually start out with an oil-based, and then I'll go in with a regular old soapy cleanser.
It seems very time consuming.
But I enjoy it.
Yeah. See, I'm the opposite. That sounds awful to me. So I don't do it. But medically, the best time of day, if you're only doing once per day, is in the evening. That's going to wash off anything that you accumulated on your face, including makeup or dirt or oil. It's also going to wash off any of those skin particles that might get in your bed and be some food for those dust mites. And again, if you have an oily complexion, you might want to wash in the morning as well. And then also if you do put on products for bed, like your mucin, you might want to wash those off in the morning. So that might be a good reason to wash in the morning as well. And you want to use a facial cleanser. And something else that I think, because I see this all over like the bristle brushes that people are like, you don't want to use that for your skin because that's really abrasive. And what actually can happen is your facial skin starts getting used to like that damage, and it starts to, essentially deteriorate the quality, and your skin will actually start to produce more oil to compensate for like the micro trauma from these scrubbers that are, some people use. So you just want to be gentle with the face. And if you do use like a cloth, use like muslin cloth. Yeah, like a muslin or like a microfiber. You don't want to use like anything abrasive, like a bristle brush or a scrubber and things like that. And you can wash your face too often too, right? Like you don't want to wash so that like it's cracked and peeling and irritated too. And of course, this rule of thumb once per day is kind of your catch-all. But again, everybody's genetics and skin condition is going to vary.
Well, and also where you live, climate, time of year. Like in the summer, I'm washing a whole lot more than I am in the winter when my skin is much more likely to be, dry. So many factors. All right. This next one, Andrea, we've talked about a bunch. We've done posts on this. I think we could pretty quickly run through this. In a nutshell, do not spend more money on soap that is labeled as antibacterial. All soap is antibacterial. This is a ridiculous marketing ploy. You do not need antibacterial soap. Andrea.
Yeah. So the biggest reason, so there are chemicals that are added like triclosan and things like that will kill bacteria. But the problem is that you have a lot of good bacteria on your hands, and having those on your hands actually takes up the acreage, the real estate that potentially harmful pathogenic bacteria could reside on, things like staphylococcus bacteria and so on. So if you use antibacterial soap, you may actually kill some of those bacteria you want to stay on your skin. And now you're making room for things to potentially colonize. You're also contributing to the evolution of bacteria that are going to be resistant to chemicals that can kill them. And obviously that's not a great thing. We don't want to push evolution of drug-resistant bacteria. So, all you really need is a detergent, and soaps are detergents, meaning they disrupt that fatty layer. And so when you're using your soap and your water, you're going to disrupt those bacteria that are adhering, then they will just get easily rinsed off with water. And it doesn't matter the temperature of the water. It can be warm water if you like that. It can be cold water if you like that. The biggest thing is the mechanical motion and the detergent in the shape of soap.
I mentioned something at the top of the episode that I just want to finish on, which is that certain things are sort of holdovers from the past. And so the example that came to my mind was that a lot of people wash their meat, in particular poultry is what I see people washing before they cook it. And this is a holdover from the past when people were often slaughtering and preparing their own food. But now there are so many regulations in place, and modern food safety system, the modern food safety system basically does not require it. And so you do not need to wash your chicken or other meat before cooking. Certainly you should never use soap. That should not be a thing. But also just think about it. I mean, if you're bringing your chicken, let's say, into your sink and you're touching the faucet, I mean, there are so many more opportunities to be spreading potentially harmful pathogens on the meat before they're cooked.
Yeah. And that goes to a lot of the holdovers with cooking implements, like cutting boards and, wooden plates, and you were supposed to bury them and you handled your meat in one sink. And I'm talking about people who are keeping kosher and, Orthodox populations. You had a dairy kitchen and you had a meat kitchen because, again, we didn't have proper sanitization processes. We can do that now. So you want to sanitize non-porous surfaces. You want to sanitize wood surfaces. You can use chlorine bleach. So 1 tablespoon of chlorine bleach per gallon of water. You can let that sit. So that would be on cutting boards, like flat surfaces. Of course, anything that's non-porous, like dishes and things like that, you can use, traditional dishwasher, hot soapy water, same sort of things that you're going to be washing, other things like knives and forks and cutlery and so on.
And just be mindful of cross-contamination. So I know, if I'm chopping veggies, I'm not going to use the same cutting board to then chop meat and then go back to cutting something else that, I'm going to throw in my salad.
Right. Especially if those veggies are going to stay raw, right?
Exactly.
If you're cutting things that are going to stay raw, you don't want to cross-contaminate that with raw meat that is designed to be cooked. So what I try to do is I do my veggie prep first if I'm using the same cutting board, and then I do any meat or raw things that are going to be cooked with the second, or use a different knife or use a different cutting board and things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm sorry, just last thing. So to your point, if I'm making chicken soup or something, I'll cut it all on the same cutting board because it's all going to get boiled. And broth and exactly. What the heck was I going to say? I don't remember. It couldn't have been that important. I feel like we covered a lot of ground.
We really did. Yeah.
I'm feeling good about this.
This was fun. And of course, got to throw a little bit of data in there. So thanks for tuning in today. We hope you learned a thing or two. And if you want to support our efforts and help us grow the impact and the reach of Unbiased Science, we welcome your contributions. We have a donation page on our website, a Venmo account, and a coffee page. Every dollar helps. And for season 4, we just launched some really snarky, fun merch, shirts and mouse pads, and we have posters. And so check that out at www.unbiasedscipod.com. And then you can also sign up for our newsletter subscription on Substack. That's the unbiasedscipod.substack.com. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube because we're putting videos up there now. So that's at YouTube at Unbiased SciPod. And of course, follow us on our social channels, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Threads at Unbiased SciPod. Catch you next time on the pod, your trusted source for no nonsense, just science.
I am a scientist.